You've been taking your medication exactly as prescribed. You've been watching what you eat. You're checking your blood sugar every morning, and the number still isn't where it should be. That's not because you're doing something wrong. There's a piece of this puzzle that almost never comes up in a 10-minute appointment. 3 minerals, and your body is losing all three of them every single day simply because of how diabetes works. Today, I want to walk you through exactly which ones, why this is happening, and the simple foods that can start putting them back this week. The hidden mechanism. Here's something most appointments never explain clearly. When your blood sugar runs high, your kidneys go into overdrive trying to clear the extra glucose out of your bloodstream. They filter it out through your urine, and that's your body trying to protect itself. But here's the part that almost nobody mentions. When your kidneys flush out that extra glucose, they don't flush out glucose by itself. They take minerals along with it. Minerals your insulin depends on. Minerals your nerves need to function properly. Minerals your heart relies on to keep a steady rhythm. And because diabetes keeps blood sugar elevated day after day, this isn't a one-time loss. It's continuous, quiet, happening again and again without a single visible sign. This is why you can be doing everything right: medication, diet, exercise, and still feel like something is missing. Something is. 3 things, specifically. Let's go through each one. Mineral 1. Magnesium. Magnesium isn't something most people think about, but if you live with diabetes, you're losing it faster than almost anyone else. Every time blood sugar rises and your kidneys flush that excess glucose out, magnesium goes right along with it. That happens daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and over months and years, it adds up to a real and meaningful depletion. Here's why that matters so directly for your blood sugar control. When insulin reaches a muscle cell to deliver glucose, the cell has to respond. It has to open, accept the signal, and activate the pathway that pulls glucose inside. That entire process needs magnesium to work. Without enough of it, the cell responds sluggishly. The door opens slowly, less glucose gets where it needs to go, and blood sugar stays higher than it should. That's insulin resistance in action, and magnesium deficiency is one of the things quietly making it worse. So the cycle looks like this. High blood sugar drains magnesium. Low magnesium makes insulin less effective. Less effective insulin keeps blood sugar elevated, and elevated blood sugar drains even more magnesium. Round and round it goes, and the number on your meter reflects it every morning. Magnesium also powers something called ATP, the basic fuel your cells run on. Every movement, every thought, every heartbeat depends on it, and ATP production depends on magnesium. This is the actual biological reason so many people with diabetes feel exhausted even after a full night's sleep and a careful diet. It isn't weakness. It's a mineral shortage limiting how well your cells can produce energy. And those leg cramps at night, the twitching, the tingling in the feet, the restless sleep, the anxious feeling with no clear cause. Magnesium is what keeps nerves from firing too easily. When it runs low, nerves become overactive, and those are exactly the symptoms that show up. People often assume this is just aging or just diabetes. In many cases, it's something addressable. But here's the part most people overlook entirely. The best foods for raising magnesium without disrupting blood sugar are cooked dark leafy greens, spinach especially. 1 cup of cooked spinach provides close to 40% of your daily magnesium need, and cooking actually matters here. Raw spinach locks magnesium inside tough plant cell walls. Cooking releases it so your body can actually absorb it. Add a little olive oil or butter when you eat it. Several of the nutrients that help absorb magnesium need a bit of fat to get into your system. Pumpkin seeds are another excellent source. A small handful, about an ounce, gives you close to 37% of your daily magnesium. You can sprinkle them on a salad, add them to oatmeal, or just eat them as a snack. Almonds, avocado, and dark chocolate above 70% cacao also contribute meaningful magnesium without much impact on blood sugar. If you're considering a supplement, the form matters more than people realize. Magnesium oxide is the cheap, widely available version, and unfortunately the one that absorbs poorly and tends to cause stomach upset, which is why so many people quit taking it. Magnesium glycinate absorbs far better and is much gentler on digestion. That's the form worth looking for. A common starting point is 200 milligrams a day with a meal, adjusted gradually based on how you feel. 2 habits quietly drain magnesium even faster than the disease alone. High sugar intake drives the same kidney flushing process that elevated blood glucose does. And alcohol directly interferes with your kidney's ability to hold on to magnesium. If either of those is part of your routine alongside diabetes, the depletion speeds up considerably. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Walter. 68 years old, living with type 2 diabetes for about 6 years on 2 medications. His fasting glucose was consistently sitting between 128 and 142 each morning. He'd cut carbohydrates substantially. He walked every day without fail, and he kept describing the same frustration, doing everything right, and the number wouldn't move. When we talked beyond the glucose reading itself, a pattern showed up. Leg cramps several nights a week that woke him from sleep. Fatigue he'd written off as simply getting older. Tingling in both feet that an earlier doctor had attributed entirely to diabetic neuropathy. When we tested his magnesium, it sat right at the bottom edge of the normal range. That matters more than it sounds like because standard blood tests for magnesium aren't very sensitive. Your body protects blood magnesium levels by pulling from what's stored in your muscles and bones first. By the time blood magnesium shows up low on a test, the total depletion in your body is often already substantial. Walter added cooked spinach to one meal a day, a small handful of pumpkin seeds as an afternoon habit, and he started magnesium glycinate, 200 milligrams with dinner each evening. Within 3 weeks, the leg cramps had eased noticeably. Within 6 weeks, his fasting glucose had shifted down into a steady range between 110 and 121. By 3 months, his physician noted the change and reduced one of his medications. Nothing dramatic changed in his life. The mineral environment changed and the number followed. Mineral 2. Zinc gets lost through that same urinary process as magnesium, but it carries an extra role in diabetes that makes its depletion especially significant. Your pancreas, the organ producing insulin, stores that insulin in a very specific way before releasing it. Insulin sits inside tiny storage compartments in your pancreas's beta cells, held in a crystal-like structure that requires zinc just to maintain its shape. Zinc isn't simply present there by coincidence. It's structurally necessary for insulin to be stored correctly and released at the right time, in the right amount. When zinc runs low, your pancreas can't store or release insulin as precisely. The whole secretion process loses accuracy. And in someone whose beta cells are already under strain from type 2 diabetes, that's adding a problem at the very source of insulin production. Beyond the pancreas, zinc is also needed at the muscle cell level, working through a separate pathway than magnesium but heading toward the same goal: getting glucose into the cell. When magnesium and zinc are both depleted at once, which is common in long-standing diabetes, the entire insulin signaling chain is being weakened at multiple points simultaneously. Zinc is also one of the body's key antioxidant minerals. It's a core part of an enzyme that neutralizes some of the most damaging molecules produced by the metabolic stress of high blood sugar. When zinc is insufficient, the oxidative damage behind diabetic complications, in the nerves, the kidneys, the eyes, tends to move faster. That's not a theory. It's part of the actual mechanism connecting zinc deficiency to the progression of those complications. This next part might surprise you. The signs of zinc deficiency are specific once you know to look for them. Wounds that take far longer than they should to heal are one of the clearest signals. Zinc plays a role in every stage of wound repair. A small cut or blister on the foot that's still there 2 weeks later isn't simply slow healing. It may be zinc deficiency interfering with a process your body is actively trying to complete. Getting sick more often than feels normal, catching colds or infections easily, reflects zinc's role in immune function. The immune cells responsible for the first line of defense against viruses and bacteria need zinc to do their job. When zinc is low, that defense weakens. Intense sugar cravings, unexplained hair thinning, skin that's dry and slow to heal, and a dulled sense of taste or smell round out the common signs. For food sources, the most bioavailable forms of zinc are animal-based. Oysters top the list by far. 3 medium oysters provide more than 200% of your daily need. If you eat beef, a 3-ounce serving of grass-fed beef gives roughly 40% of your daily zinc, and beef liver provides even more. If you prefer plant sources, pumpkin seeds come up again, about 50% of your daily zinc per ounce. That makes pumpkin seeds genuinely one of the most efficient foods for diabetes management, since they address both magnesium and zinc at once. with very little effect on blood sugar. Chickpeas and lentils contain zinc too, but plant-based zinc is bound up with phytic acid in the plant's cell wall, which limits absorption. Soaking or sprouting legumes before cooking reduces that phytic acid significantly and improves how much zinc your body can actually use, worth knowing if plant foods are your main source. If you're looking at supplements, zinc picolinate and zinc bisglycinate absorb best with the fewest digestive issues. A typical range for someone managing diabetes is 15 to 25 milligrams of elemental zinc daily. One important caution: at sustained doses above 40 milligrams, zinc starts competing with copper for absorption, which can gradually deplete it. If you're supplementing above 15 milligrams long-term, pairing it with a small amount of copper, around 1 to 2 milligrams, helps keep that balance steady. If this is giving you a clearer picture than your last appointment did, a quick like helps more people find this video. Now let's keep going, because there's one more mineral, and it might be the most overlooked of all. Mineral 3. Chromium. Chromium is the least familiar of the three, and it acts on a different part of the process entirely: the insulin receptor itself. Years of research identified a compound, often called the glucose tolerance factor, that dramatically improves how effectively insulin binds to its receptor on the surface of a cell. Chromium is the active mineral inside that compound. Here's what that means practically. Insulin arrives at your muscle cell and needs to connect with its receptor qi, the molecular structure built to receive it. For that connection to transmit a clear, complete signal into the cell, the receptor needs to be in the right state to bind strongly. Chromium is what helps maintain that state. When chromium runs low, insulin binds less effectively. The signal weakens. Less glucose enters the cell for the same amount of insulin, and blood sugar stays higher than it should, even with insulin doing its part. This is a different failure point than magnesium. Magnesium affects what happens after binding, chromium affects the binding itself. Two separate breakdowns, two separate steps in the same chain. And in many people with type 2 diabetes, both are happening at once. Chromium is lost through urine the same way as magnesium and zinc when glucose is elevated. But it has an additional depletion path that matters especially for people over 60. Cortisol, the stress hormone that rises with anxiety, poor sleep, illness, and simply the emotional weight of managing a chronic condition, increases how much chromium your body excretes through urine. In other words, the stress of living with diabetes speeds up the very depletion the disease is already causing. The more stressed and sleep-deprived someone is, the faster chromium falls, and the harder insulin has to work to do its job. The signs of chromium deficiency tend to overlap with what feels like just poorly controlled diabetes. Blood sugar that's stubborn despite consistent effort. Intense carbohydrate and sugar cravings. Fatigue and mental fog. Mood swings that feel out of proportion to what's actually going on. These aren't only symptoms of diabetes itself, they can also be signs that chromium depletion is compounding the underlying insulin resistance in a way that diet and medication alone can't fully reach. The most accessible chromium-rich food by far is broccoli. Half a cup of cooked broccoli provides roughly 50% of your daily chromium need, while also delivering fiber, vitamin C, and a compound with documented anti-inflammatory properties. Broccoli twice a week is one of the most efficient nutritional moves available to someone managing diabetes. Lean beef provides about 25% of daily chromium per 3-ounce serving. Eggs contribute 10 to 15% per large egg, and Brazil nuts are surprisingly chromium-dense. A single nut provides close to 30% of the daily requirement. For supplementation, chromium picolinate and chromium polynicotinate have the strongest evidence for blood sugar benefit. A typical effective range runs 200 to 500 micrograms daily. It's worth starting at 200 micrograms and giving it 6 to 8 weeks before judging the effect. Chromium works gradually, with meaningful changes in fasting glucose and insulin sensitivity, often developing over 8 to 12 weeks of consistent use. The habits that accelerate chromium loss the most are high refined carbohydrate and sugar intake, which increases insulin demand and drives excretion, poor sleep, which raises cortisol, and alcohol, which interferes with chromium metabolism independently of everything else it does to blood sugar. How these three work together. Here's the full picture, and it's the part that ties everything together. Chromium helps insulin bind to its receptor effectively. Magnesium allows that receptor to properly respond to the binding signal and activate the pathway inside the cell. And zinc is required both for insulin to be stored and released correctly from the pancreas, and for the signaling that moves glucose transporters into position inside the cell. These are three sequential steps in the same process. If even one is compromised, the whole pathway works less efficiently. If all three are compromised at once, which is common in long-standing type 2 diabetes, the combined impairment becomes substantial. This is exactly why focusing on glucose alone through medication or diet, while these mineral deficiencies go unaddressed, often produces incomplete results. You end up managing the output of a system whose components aren't fully working, and the number on your meter reflects that gap every single morning. Where to begin this week? Add cooked spinach to one meal a day with a touch of olive oil. That single change starts addressing magnesium in a form your body can actually use. Add a small handful of pumpkin seeds daily. About an ounce covers both magnesium and zinc at once, with minimal effect on blood sugar. Add broccoli to 2 meals this week. Half a cup cooked at each one begins addressing chromium in a way your body processes efficiently. If you're considering supplements, talk with your physician first, especially if you have kidney disease or take medications for blood pressure, heart rhythm, or glucose control. If it's appropriate for you, the forms with the best track record are magnesium glycinate, zinc picolinate or bisglycinate, and chromium picolinate. And where you can reduce the habits that drain these minerals faster than the disease alone. High sugar intake, alcohol, and poor sleep all accelerate the loss. Addressing even one of those slows how quickly your body is losing what it needs. Give it real time. Magnesium's effects on sleep, cramping, and nerve symptoms often show up within 2 to 4 weeks. Changes in fasting glucose typically become visible somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks. Chromium's effect on insulin sensitivity tends to develop over 8 to 12 weeks. This isn't an overnight fix. It's the actual timeline of how the body rebuilds something it's been losing for a long time. The number you check every morning isn't just a glucose reading. It's a small report on everything happening inside your cells, whether your insulin receptors are responding the way they should, whether your pancreas is releasing insulin efficiently, and whether the minerals that make all of that possible are actually present in your body. For a lot of people managing type 2 diabetes, they're not aware, and nobody ever explained why. Now you know. Your medication is doing what medication can do. Your diet is doing what diet can do. These three minerals are addressing the part neither one of those alone can fully reach. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. I always love seeing how far this reaches. I'm Dr. David Aid, and if this gave you a clearer answer than your last appointment did, consider subscribing. I cover topics exactly like this every week, the things that matter for your health but rarely make it into a 10-minute visit. And if someone you know is managing diabetes carefully and still can't explain why the numbers won't move, send them this video. It might be exactly what they've been missing. I'll see you in the next one.